Okay, one of the first steps that you should do when doing a water pump job on one of these 5.7 Hemis is to loosen the cooling fan, the mechanical cooling fan. One tool that I like to use is one of these fan removal tools. This holds the water pump pulley so that you can go ahead and remove the the fan, which is a 36 millimeter, has a 36 millimeter nut right there. So this tool allows you to use a breaker bar, and then you line it up. You line it up with the holes on the pulley. Like so. Hopefully you get a view of that on camera. And then what that does is it holds the pulley stationary so that you can go ahead and remove the fan nut. Sometimes these can be on here really tight. There's been a couple times where I've needed an assistant to hold. Oh wow. This one was not on very tight at all. So what you need to do from here is loosen the fan so that you can move on to the next step, which would be removing the fan shroud, radiator fan shroud. Very fine threads on this, so it might take a while for you to remove it. Sometimes you can sneak it out, other times you can't. But see there, I was able to sneak it out. Side. Alright, so up next, let's remove the fan shroud. There's a couple of bolts on each side of the fan shroud. We'll go ahead and remove those now. Kind of awkward, but usually once you break them loose, they come undone rather easily. Okay. From here, you should be able to pull up on the fan shroud to loosen it. You'll want to disconnect the connectors for the washer pump and the washer level sensor. And then there's probably a hose that you need to remove too. And that would be on the overflow tank and the washer bottle tank. Do this off camera so that I can get a plug so that I don't lose all the washer fluid. All right. Okay, from here you should have easy access to the radiator drain cock. All it takes is a 3/8 drive ratchet to loosen it. Actually, I lied. It is not a 3/8 drive square standby. Okay, it is a 10mm hex that you have to use to loosen that drain cock. Sometimes it takes a bit for it to get going. Once you get it started, you can go ahead and remove the radiator cap, and that'll help get things going. So go ahead and let the radiator drain out. Okay, you can go ahead and remove the upper radiator hose once you've got the majority of the fluid drained out of the radiator. Okay, like so. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the lower radiator hose once more of this antifreeze is drained out. Alright, once you're done draining the radiator and you've removed the radiator hoses from the radiator, you can go ahead and remove the serpentine belt. As you might notice in this view, I've actually got the radiator out so I can give you a better view of what's going on. You do not need to remove the radiator to do this job. Anyway, you want to put a 3/8 drive ratchet or pry bar, or breaker bar, or something that you can have good leverage. In this case, I've got a serpentine belt removal tool. Oh, and before you remove it, take note of the belt routing. Not all these vehicles have a belt routing guide on the fan shroud. Always take good notes as to where the belts go or how they're routed so that you can put them back when you're done with the job. So you go ahead and remove the serpentine belt like so. Alright. And it comes out just like that. Now is a good time to check your pulleys, your idler pulleys and whatnot, to see if any of them have any weird noises. These ones sound pretty good. Pretty smooth. I think they'll be alright. Okay, so for the next step, you're going to want to remove what's left of the radiator hose. There's a heater hose here that you want to unplug. Basically the same thing, you just use pliers to remove these spring clamps. You'll also want to remove the serpentine belt tensioner, and I usually remove the idler pulleys just to get them out of my way and so I can check them more thoroughly. Okay, I realize I forgot to mention what size the bolts are. You're going to want to use a 13mm for both of the idler pulleys and a 15mm to release the tensioner pulley, or the tensioner assembly. And then for the for the heater hoses, just use pliers just like before. Sometimes you need to finagle these hoses, but eventually they do come off. Repeat with both of these hoses. Okay, once you've got the hoses disconnected, you're going to want to remove all of these bolts. This one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. You want to get this bracket off. There's a bolt up here. There's a bolt here. I don't know if you can see it. Bolt here, a bolt here, and a bolt underneath the big pulley here. Keep track of what bolt goes where. They are of different lengths. You don't want to put the wrong size bolt back in when you're putting it back together. It's very important. Okay, there is one more bolt here that you got to remove, hidden behind that bracket. So go ahead and remove those now. So, and then we have this one here that needs to be removed. All of these bolts have 13mm heads on them. I believe that one's a 16. Let's see. $15. It is a 15. So go ahead and undo this one as well. Okay, now all the bolts are loose. I'm going to go ahead and make a template on a piece of cardboard so that I don't lose track of where each bolt goes. Unfortunately, I'm not an artist, but here's my template just so I know where each bolt is. Kind of how things go. It's enough for me to understand where they go. If you're so inclined, go ahead and make a better template. The important part is just that you get the bolts back in the correct places. For this bolt right here, you're going to have to loosen the power steering pump a little bit so you can get that bolt out. Once you get that pump loose, this bolt should come right out. Fortunately, they put holes in the pulley, so getting that kind of out of the way is not going to be a problem. Alright, once you've made sure all of the bolts are out, all the hoses are undone, you can go ahead and pull the water pump off of the block. Alright, so we got all the bolts out. Oh wow. A lot of the times you have to whack it with a rubber mallet, but in this case it pulled right off. You'll notice that a whole bunch more coolant came out, so be prepared, have containment ready under your vehicle. But that's pretty much it to get the water pump out. The nice thing about these Hemis, they have a nice O-ring, so you don't really have to scrape much of anything for putting the new pump in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pull this pump out of the way and clean the engine block in preparation for the new pump. Okay, we're on the bench here real quick. This is the old water pump. One thing you're going to need to do before you put the new water pump in is to get this water outlet or water neck off. Pretty easy. It's a 13mm socket that's necessary. Just 2 bolts, and this water neck comes off. You're going to want to take a wire wheel or something and clean this surface off. This is where the upper radiator hose goes on, and you'll also want to clean the corrosion and stuff off of the bottom here. And here's where the thermostat is. Generally speaking, I go ahead and put a brand new thermostat whenever I install a brand new thermostat whenever I do a water pump. It's just a good practice. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and clean this up, and we'll get to prepping the new water pump here shortly. Okay, so I've got the water neck cleaned up, all the loose paint taken off with a wire wheel, and all the corrosion removed as well. Same on the hose side. Anyway, here's the new pump. This is a Gates pump 43501. Some other additional part numbers here: 943501 7702-0138. I'm going to go ahead and put a new water pump, thermostat back in. It's a stock temperature. It's 203 Fahrenheit. Part number is 34053. Just go ahead and pull this new water pump out of the box. Okay, you can see that it's got comes with a new rubber O-ring, just like the original. And the area that we're interested in right now is the thermostat housing. Okay, so what we need to do is line it up like we're putting it on the engine block, like so. There's a pinto valve right here which allows air bubbles to come out. You want to line that up so that it's approximately straight up when the water pump is mounted to the engine. So like so. Goes on just like so. It's a rubber gasket, so you don't have to worry about it. All you have to do is just make sure that pinto valve is, I think it's called a pinto valve. Anyway, that needs to go up. And from here, we just put the thermostat housing on with the 2 bolts, and I'll list the torque spec in the comments below. Okay, once we've got the water neck installed and the thermostat in, we just want to make sure that the gasket is intact. Nothing's wrong with it, no obvious defects. And from here, we can go ahead and put it onto the engine block. Of course, we've got the engine block cleaned off. So we'll go ahead and move on to the front of the engine. Okay, I've got the front of the engine block cleaned off. I took a wire brush here and just got the loose corrosion off of the face here. Everything's wiped down and clean. So now we can go ahead and put the water pump on the block and start bolting it on. And I usually like to start like so. Okay, kind of hard to do when I've got the camera in the way, but so we want to make sure everything's clean, the gasket's in place. And go ahead and hang it up by the first bolt here. So we've got the first bolt in, and I'm going to go ahead and put the remaining bolts into the block here, and we always want to thread them in by hand. Very important. Okay, I want to note that before you start running the bolts in, you want to make sure they're nice and clean. On these engines, it is not required to put any sort of sealant on these bolts. They can go in dry, which is kind of a plus. So go ahead and run the remaining bolts in by hand, and I'll see you in the next segment. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and torque the water pump down to 21 foot-pounds. It's not a very high amount of torque. The timing chain cover, which is the front of the block, and the water pump are made out of aluminum, so you don't want to go too tight. So what we're going to do is we're going to go around in a star pattern. So something like this: first one, second one, third one, fourth one, fifth one, and so on. Kind of not really a star like you do your lug nuts, but more like what you do in a cylinder head, where you kind of go in a outward spiral. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Okay, so now we're just going to go around and make sure everything is torqued. Okay, now that's done. We can go ahead and put this bracket that's normally mounted right here. So we'll do that in the next segment. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put this bracket on. Put everything on by hand. Okay, and for good measure, we're going to go ahead and tighten these to 21 foot-pounds as well. Okay, those are torqued. Okay, next step is to tighten the power steering pump back to the block and then connect all the hoses, and then we'll go ahead and put the idler pulleys and the tensioning arm back on. Okay, the torque spec for both of these here is 30 foot-pounds, and same with the tensioner. So go ahead and do that real quick. All right, those are both to spec. And then, all right, all of those are tightened to spec. Okay, so from here, we're going to go ahead and put the belt back on. Okay, we're going to go ahead and put the belt on, pretty much reverse of how we removed it. I'm going to use the tensioner tool to relieve some tension on the belt here. And I'm just going to go ahead and route it just like it was before we took it off. We want to make sure that the belt is centered on all the pulleys. Okay, see, this is why we check. I did not get it completely on the AC belt here, or AC pump. There we go. We want to make sure that the belt is centered in all the grooves and on all the pulleys. Okay, now we go ahead and put the radiator shroud on, connect up the upper radiator hose, and finally put the radiator fan onto the hub of the water pump. Okay, now that we've got the belt back on, the radiator hoses back on, it's time to put the fan shroud back on, and that just simply drops into place. You might need to keep the upper radiator hose disconnected to give you some extra space there, but yeah, we're almost complete here. Just need to do a couple more steps, and once we do that, we can go ahead and fill the radiator up. Okay. Alright, so the radiator has a couple of slots, or the radiator fan has a couple of slots that it fits into. From there, we put these two bolts back in. There's one here and one on the other side next to the bottle. Once you do that, the radiator shroud is on, and we can go ahead and put the radiator fan back in. Okay. For this passenger side bolt, it's a good idea to use a flex head gear wrench. That really helps things with this one here. Okay, snug. Don't forget the hose for the overflow tank and the hose for the washer fluid. And the electrical plugs for the washer pump and the low washer fluid light. Okay, all right, that's it for those. Okay, now we bring the, we'll be installing the radiator fan and screwing that onto the water pump. And like before, these things just sneak in. You should be able to just sneak it in. Like so. And then you want to thread this onto the water pump hub. Start it by hand. Once you have it on a few threads, you can use the fan to spin the nut on. All right. And go ahead and tighten her up with 36 millimeter. All right. Okay, from here we just put the upper radiator hose on, and we can proceed with filling the radiator with a 50-50 mix of G05 antifreeze, or if you'd like, the Mopar antifreeze, which is just a pink colored G05. I like to use a 50-50 mix of Zerex G05. That's 50-50 with distilled water. Anyway, also, this is my new favorite tool. It allows you to fill the radiator without having to wait for the radiator to take the fluid. You can pour the entire thing in here. It won't overflow. And in the event that the radiator's full, you could use a stopper to plug it and remove it nice and quickly. Okay, so the radiator is full now. I squeeze this upper radiator hose, and I've gotten all the air out of the radiator here. So I'm going to go ahead and start the engine. We're going to turn the heat on all the way to hot, as high as it'll go, and we'll let this thing warm up and get up to operating temperature. Okay, as you can see there, we're at 199 degrees. The radiator is pretty much done burping itself out. The thermostat has cycled a couple of times now. It'd get up to 208 and then it dropped down to 190, which tells us that the thermostat is opening. We got good flow. The upper radiator hose is nice and warm now. No longer pushing any air bubbles up. So now just plug this. Took the funnel out, and then we're going to go ahead and put the radiator cap back on and take it for a test drive. Alrighty, well, I just took the truck for a nice long test drive, got it up to operating temperature, made sure that the cooling system pressurized. As you can see here, the upper radiator hose is nice and firm. None of the radiator hoses are leaking. The upper hose is not leaking. The thermostat does not appear to be leaking. The coolant reservoir is between max and min. I'll probably top it back off to the max mark after it cools down. The heater hoses are nice and dry. And the most important part, the water pump is not leaking. There's no moisture, no signs of it leaking. Everything is looking pretty good. So as you can see, it's not too bad of a job, not too difficult. Certainly something a DIY or mechanically competent person can do. Pretty easy. I do like that these water pumps don't have any sort of gasket that you've got to scrape off or seal up. It's just an O-ring. You just make sure the surfaces are clean and it just bolts right up. And as you can see here, we're not hearing any funny noises, and this is probably as quiet as a Hemi will ever get. You can hear the injectors clicking away, but no Hemi tick. So I'd say this is a successful repair. Anyway, if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel. And if you like this video, please click the like button and share it with anyone else that might be interested in it. And anyway, we'll catch you next time. Thanks.